images were of the Gethsemane Church, where on October 7th there was a huge demonstration and thousands of people were arrested and taken to held overnight in various camps. Then we had gone through Alexanderplatz, where the demonstrations had moved from Alexanderplatz to the Lustgarten and sat down in front of the Staatsratsvorsitzende, the Council of Ministers meeting, and prevented the crowd from going towards the Brandenburg Gate, where the police and the border police were there waiting for this confrontation. So there began to be many things. The demonstration on November 4th was a huge demonstration. On October 7th, backwards, the visit by Gorbachev was seen as the order for Glasnost and Perestroika to happen. Honecker had to go, Modrow had to come, and was unleashing the fight between Gorbachev and the Ligachevs of the world who were fighting his policy. So there are many, many incidents, and little ones, big ones, that left us as a very, very uncertain time. What would happen? They were still armed very, very heavily on both sides of the Berlin Wall. We didn't know. We were very uncertain of what would happen. So when the wall came down on November 9th, we sighed a sigh of relief. And it was a chance to step back and to see where we might go. Then things began to change in a different way. Roundtables were established. The pace of the revolution was breathtaking, but there was an order to it. The roundtables took over cities and villages, and they made decisions and they governed. The garbage was still picked up. The demonstrations still continued, and then you could see the shift of the debate from the revolution. And there were three things that were important in that revolution. One was the revolution itself, October 7th in Leipzig to, October 9th in Leipzig until November 9th in Berlin. The active revolution when people went to the streets and brought down the government. The second was March 18th. March 18th, after Secretary Baker came to visit us on December 12th and 13th in 1989, he met with Mr. Modrow and with the church. And in those meetings, there were two subjects. The communists were talking about implementing perestroika, and joint ventures would be offered for 49% ownership. And Mr. Baker had given his famous speech of the 4 conditions for German unification, which he told them, but Modrow said, we're not talking about unification of Germany. He then met with Manfred Stolpe and a couple of church leaders at the Lutheran Church of the Nikolaikirche, and told him essentially the same thing. I've given this speech in West Berlin. We have these 4 points on unification. I hope you continue to be peacefully demonstrating. We don't want any escalation. And the answer was, we're fighting for the renewal of the GDR. We're not talking about unification. This is in December. But throughout December, things began to change, and by January, Mr. Modrow, who by then was Prime Minister, decided that he would recreate the Stasi in the form of the Office for National Security. He undercut all of his credibility. The election that he was planning to have in May was moved to March, and the communists knew that they would lose. March 18th is the democratic act of the election of the Volkskammer that was given a mandate for unification. The 2+4 agreement discussions began in February, so they began then in parallel to then switch from the revolution to the negotiations. So when the negotiations came to East Berlin, the embassy was very much involved in June of 1990 at the Schloss Niederschönhausen. We obviously contributed to them, but if you want an image, you have Mr. Kohl, a very big man, standing next to Mr. de Maizière, a very small man, and there was the relative power distribution in the 2+4 negotiations. But the third act, I mentioned the fall of the Berlin Wall, the revolution, October 9th, November 9th, the election on March 18th. The third act was an act that was the East Germans to make, and that was to accede to the Constitution under Article 23. During the election, in fact, I think it was the Bündnis 90 had a wonderful campaign poster, and the campaign poster was kein Anschluss unter diese Nummer, Article 23. That's the telephone answering call when you don't have a connection. Kein Anschluss unter diese Nummer, with the emphasis, of course, on Anschluss, the annexation of Austria by Hitler in 1938. So it was a fascinating campaign. But the decision was taken. Now, I must admit that Chancellor Kohl had two options that he could do for unification in the 2+4 talks. They could have done Article 146 at the time, which would be writing a new constitution. Or the West Germans would encourage the East Germans to accede to the constitution under Article 23. As you could hear from this discussion, the events were going very, very quickly, and they were not to be stopped. People were still escaping. The Soviet Union was falling apart. The decision was to support the idea of unification under Article 23. And then the terms of the 2+4 negotiation, very well negotiated, very solidly supported by the United States, and eventually with winning over the support of President Mitterrand and Maggie Thatcher.